After a heated fight, my in-laws erased me completely, no texts, no calls, nothing. Even my husband shrugged, saying, they'll come around. So I stopped waiting. I booked a one-way ticket and left. By the time they realized I was gone, I had already built a new life. It happened on a Wednesday evening in Charleston. The night air was warm, laced with the scent of salt and magnolia. We were supposed to be having a quiet family dinner at a quaint seafood bistro near the harbor, myself, my husband Ethan, and his parents, Gerald and Louise. I should have known better. Somewhere between the grilled oysters and the snapper, Gerald launched into one of his signature rants, a bitter monologue about modern women, soft men, and how no real wife would choose career over family. I looked to Ethan for support. He didn't flinch. He sipped his wine and stared off at the water like the conversation didn't exist. So I smiled, the kind of smile that masks 1,000 buried sighs, and said calmly, if you want me barefoot in the kitchen, I hope you're ready to cover the mortgage and all the bills. The silence at the table was instant. Cold. Sharp. Gerald set his fork down with a loud clink. Louise gave a long, theatrical sigh, as though I'd committed some unspeakable sin. And Ethan? He reached under the table and gave my thigh a squeeze, not affectionate, but a warning. Enough, he muttered. That was the last straw. I stood up, dropped my napkin on my plate, and walked out into the night without looking back. I expected Ethan to follow. He didn't. I told myself they'd call the next day. Or the day after. That maybe Gerald would offer a half-hearted apology, something like, you know how I get. But the silence stretched on. No calls. No messages. Not from his parents, not from his sister Brooke, not even a holiday card from the family I had spent 6 years trying to belong to. The worst part? Ethan went along with it. I tested it. Brooke's birthday came and went, no message from me. Nothing. I ignored the family group chat. No one noticed. I skipped the RSVP to his cousin's wedding. Not even a text. It was like I had vanished. 2 weeks into this ghosting campaign, I finally asked him, has your family said anything about me? He didn't even look up from his phone. Nope, he said with a shrug. They'll come around. That was it. No outrage. No defense. No comfort. That night, I lay in bed beside him, wide awake, staring at the ceiling of the home we bought together, and realized I was a stranger in my own life. My husband had watched his family erase me, and instead of speaking up, he handed them the pen. The next morning, I stopped trying. No more birthday reminders. No more carefully wrapped gifts. No more fake smiles at holiday gatherings. I shut down every part of me that had ever tried to earn their love. And Ethan didn't notice. Not even once. It wasn't until I came home late from work one night that he finally acknowledged the shift. He was microwaving leftovers, eyes half on the TV. You forget to cook? He asked, laughing. I dropped my bag, took a long breath, and stared at him. No, I said softly. I just figured since I don't exist, my cooking shouldn't either. He blinked. Confused. Almost amused. You're still mad about my parents? Still mad. I didn't respond. I walked into the bedroom and locked the door behind me. That was the moment something in me broke, or maybe, finally healed. Because in that silence, I realized something terrifying and beautiful. They had erased me. And now, I could finally choose who I wanted to become without them. After that night, something inside me withered, not in sorrow, but in clarity. There's a quiet devastation that comes with being erased while you're still breathing. I would walk around our house, the one I helped build, furnish, and make a home, and suddenly, everything felt foreign. Like I was living inside a glass box where I could see my life happening but no longer touch it. I stopped texting first. I stopped reminding Ethan to call his mom on her birthday. I stopped pretending like I hadn't noticed his sister Brooke unfollowed me on Instagram or that his cousin left me off the group wedding invite. The group chat that used to ding on my phone like a heartbeat? Dead silent. They had snipped me out of the picture like I was never meant to be there. And Ethan? Ethan noticed none of it. The man I married used to touch my back gently in the kitchen, used to kiss my forehead before bed. But now? Now he scrolled past me like I was background noise. I waited. I waited for him to ask why I had become quiet. Why I no longer stayed up helping him with emails or brought him coffee in the morning. I waited for him to ask me how I was, just ask. But he never did. One night, I made a silent decision. I opened my laptop, not to scroll or escape, but to act. Step 1, a lawyer. Not for divorce. Not yet. I just wanted to ensure that my name was still mine, that the account with my salary was still untouchable, that the investments I made were safe. Step 2, a recruiter. I already worked remote in digital marketing, but I needed more. I wanted options. Freedom. A way out that didn't require a man or a map tied to someone else's last name. Step 3, a lease. I found it online, a cozy townhouse in a quiet neighborhood in Portland. Trees lined the streets. The backyard was small but green. There was a window seat. I imagined sitting there with a book, rain tapping the glass, no one expecting anything from me. No cold eyes. No forced smiles. Just space. I booked a one-way ticket. The days leading up to my departure passed like a slow dream. I packed after Ethan went to bed. I kept a smile on my face at breakfast. I didn't slam a single door. I didn't argue. I didn't even cry. I just disappeared in plain sight. 2 weeks later, I stood in the kitchen with 3 suitcases and a folder of carefully prepared legal documents when Ethan walked in after work. He blinked. Confused. What's all this? I looked at him, really looked, at the man who had let his family erase me without lifting a finger. I'm leaving. He let out a short, incredulous laugh. Leaving? For what? Portland. For how long? I tilted my head. Indefinitely. His laugh died on his lips. You're being dramatic. I picked up the handle of my suitcase. And you were being silent. He stared at me, jaw tight, eyes wide like he'd just woken up from a dream. But it was me who had finally woken up. I walked past him. He didn't follow. When the door closed behind me, it didn't slam. It whispered. It whispered freedom. And behind that whisper was a storm I would no longer weather for anyone but myself. I had barely been gone a week when the phone calls started. First it was Ethan, his voice hollow, nervous. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask where I was. All he said was, "Are you seriously doing this?" I took a sip of my coffee and stared at the mist outside my new townhouse window. You told me they'd come around, I said, my voice calm, steady. Silence. I didn't think you'd actually leave, he finally muttered. No, I said quietly. You just didn't think about me at all. That was when I knew he never really believed I would choose myself. And then, 2 days later, he showed up. It was raining, hard. The kind of cold, relentless rain that matched the way my heart felt watching him stand on my front porch, soaked and furious, eyes wild like he hadn't slept since I left. I didn't invite him in. I opened the door just wide enough to make eye contact. You blocked me, he accused. Yes, I replied. I did. You just moved out. Just like that. Without telling me. I did tell you, Ethan, I said, tightening my grip on the doorframe. You just didn't listen. He stepped forward like he was still entitled to enter my space. You really think this is your life now? I looked around at the boxes still waiting to be unpacked, at the books on the window ledge, the plants I had just watered that morning. I know it is. And then came the shift, the moment his mask slipped. His hands clenched. His jaw tensed. His voice dropped, darker, colder. You're a selfish bitch, you know that? It landed like a slap. Not because of the word. But because I'd never heard him say anything like that before. And suddenly, it was so clear, this wasn't love. It never had been. This was possession. I gave you everything, he snapped. And this is how you repay me? You didn't give me anything, I said softly. You tolerated me. You used me. You need to come home. I laughed, sharp, bitter. Why? So your family can pretend I don't exist again? So you can ignore me until I disappear? Because you're my wife, he said, like that word was a leash. And you don't just leave your husband like this. But I had. And I would again. Then, just before I closed the door, he said something that made my stomach drop. You should check your bank account. That night, hands trembling, I opened my laptop and logged in. Every joint account was empty. Our savings. The emergency fund. Even the checking account we used for bills. Gone. And then I saw it, the transaction. A wire transfer for $40,000. To his father. To Gerald. I couldn't breathe. That money wasn't his. It was ours. It was mine, paychecks, bonuses, extra hours, late nights. Rent money. Security. My future. I sat there in the quiet, staring at the blinking cursor on the bank screen as something inside me cracked wide open. He had stolen from me. He had planned this. He wanted me to come crawling back, broken, desperate, begging him for help so he could say, "See? You need me." But what Ethan didn't know, what he had never known, was that I had been invisible to him for so long, he forgot I existed outside of him. He didn't know what I'd moved before I left. He didn't know the woman he dismissed for years had become someone he couldn't control. And now? He'd stolen from the wrong woman. I picked up my phone, my hand steady this time, and called my lawyer. "It's me," I said. "We have a problem." "No. Not a problem. A war." The moment I hung up with my lawyer, something in me shifted. The panic, that tight, suffocating grip in my chest, didn't disappear. But it crystallized. It turned sharp. Focused. I was no longer a woman who had been robbed. I was a woman ready to strike back. Ethan thought he had cornered me. That draining our accounts and funneling the money into his father's name would trap me. That I'd crawl back humiliated, grateful to be taken in by the man who erased me. But what he didn't know, what men like Ethan and Gerald never know, is that the silence they force on women becomes a weapon. And I had weapons. Weeks before I left, my gut had already known something was wrong. I had quietly moved my personal savings into an account he didn't know about. The money in the joint accounts? That was his. His rent money. His emergency fund. His illusion of control. He hadn't stolen from me. He had stolen from himself. I spent the night gathering everything. Screenshots of bank transfers. Statements. Every thread of digital evidence, I wove them together like a noose. By morning, my lawyer had filed a fraud alert with the bank and drafted a formal demand for repayment. The email subject line read: "Immediate legal action, unauthorized financial transfer." Ethan and Gerald received it within the hour. But the real beauty came in Gerald's reply. It was short. Arrogant. Almost laughable. The money was a gift. Ryan made his own decisions. I won't be returning a cent. I laughed out loud. Not because it was funny, but because it was perfect. He didn't realize it yet, but Gerald had just thrown his own son to the wolves. Ethan had no idea that while he had been scheming with his father behind my back, I had been building a case behind theirs. Quietly. Diligently. Rage doesn't have to be loud to be lethal. And then I remembered something Ethan forgot. The recordings. For months, I had collected voicemails, emails, texts. Gerald's sneering comments. Patricia's emails criticizing women who had separate bank accounts. Brooke's texts mocking me as a gold digger while I was the one covering half their wedding gifts. But the real gem? A voicemail Gerald left Ethan one late night, slurred with whiskey and disdain. "Don't worry about the money, son. If she fights back, we'll make sure she walks away with nothing." There it was. Proof of intent. Proof of collusion. Proof of everything. I sent it to my lawyer. Within the day, the next email was drafted, a settlement demand, or we go to court. They didn't reply immediately. But I could imagine the panic. I could imagine Ethan's face when he realized his father had not only abandoned him, but might have cost him everything. And I didn't feel bad. Not even a little. Because for years, I had been patient. I had been kind. I had begged for scraps of respect. And when they finally threw me away like a broken ornament, I rebuilt myself from the shards. I was no longer the woman who sat quiet at family dinners. I was no longer the one who smiled through insults and played nice to be accepted. I was the reckoning. And now, they would sit at my table. In my inbox, I watched the typing bubble flicker under Gerald's name. I knew what it would be, a deal. An offer. A lifeline. But they'd learn one more lesson before this was over. You don't get to buy back silence from the woman you tried to destroy. Not without paying in full. The day of the settlement meeting, the sky was gray and heavy, the kind that mirrors your mood before a storm breaks. I stood in front of the tall glass building downtown, hands steady, breath even. This wasn't just a legal proceeding. This was my liberation ceremony. Inside the firm's conference room, the air was cold, crisp with tension. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretched behind me, and the city lights glimmered like 1,000 eyes watching the reckoning unfold. Gerald sat at the end of the long mahogany table, jaw tight, arms crossed, like the king of a crumbling empire. Ethan was beside him, hollow, pale, with shadows under his eyes that told me he hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, maybe hadn't even felt since the last time he stood on my doorstep. He looked like a man who had lost something vital. He lost me. I took my seat across from them, my attorney calm and poised beside me. Gerald's lawyer cleared his throat, shuffling papers like the sound could hide the fear behind the deal they were about to offer. My clients, he began, voice clipped, are prepared to offer a financial settlement in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement. I tilted my head. And how much of the stolen money are they prepared to return? A portion, the lawyer said, eyes flickering toward Gerald. That was when Gerald finally spoke. His voice was acid-wrapped in civility. You're not getting all of it. You abandoned your marriage. Why should we pay you anything? I stared at him for a moment. Then, without a word, I reached into my bag and slid a folder across the table. Inside it were printed emails, screenshots of text messages, and a transcript of the voicemail where Gerald had said, with complete arrogance, "We'll make sure she walks away with nothing." I watched as their lawyer's face paled. Ethan leaned forward and caught a glimpse of his own words. "She'll never leave. She's too emotional. We'll crush her if she tries anything." His face cracked, a mix of shame, disbelief, and a fear he'd never had to feel before. "You recorded this?" their lawyer asked. I smiled. I'm a woman who was taught to be quiet. So I listened. And I documented. Gerald's fists clenched. "You wouldn't dare go public with this." I met his glare. "Try me." Ethan's voice finally broke the tension. "You planned all this." I turned to him. "You really think I wanted this? That I wanted to leave the man I once loved? You didn't lose me, Ethan. You gave me away. You sat back while they erased me. And when I finally walked away, you drained our accounts and handed everything to the man who never thought I was good enough." He looked down. For the first time, I saw it, not guilt. Not even remorse. But defeat. The realization that his puppet strings had been pulled all along. That his father didn't protect him. He used him. Gerald stood, angry now. "You're destroying this family." I rose too, slow and deliberate. "No. You destroyed it, the moment you decided control was more important than love." They signed. Every cent returned. Plus damages. Plus a legal gag order that would silence them for once. And I walked out of that building lighter than I had felt in years. 2 days later, Gerald's company issued a press release announcing his early retirement. I hadn't leaked the messages, someone else had. Maybe an employee. Maybe karma. Either way, the empire he built on power and intimidation finally collapsed under its own weight. Ethan tried calling once. Just once. His voicemail said, "I don't know what to do anymore." I never called back. Because the truth is, I didn't need to do anything. I had already done the hardest thing a woman in my position could do. I had left, even when no one thought I would. I had chosen myself, even when they told me I wasn't worth choosing. And now, I live in a quiet house by the sea. I drink my coffee on the porch in the mornings. I take long walks without looking over my shoulder. I have peace. I have silence, not the kind they used to punish me, but the kind I reclaimed as mine. I don't think about them often. But when I do, it's not with bitterness. It's with a smile. Because they erased me from their family. And in doing so, they gave me back to myself.